When I actually got into the application process, I realized that, okay, only one step of the journey was actually done. It always helps if you have a consultant who can, sort of help you sail through this process. I started looking for admission consultants and who would be somebody who would align with my needs.
For most of the people who are looking at this right now, I think just for them, I think it would be great if you just let us know very briefly about where you were coming from and why did the thought of MBA even pop into your head? Like, where did the journey begin?
So basically, I work as an analyst in an advertising agency called Essence Media Com, and I work a lot with data. Previously, I study like campaign data that's run for our clients on various media platforms and give suggestions to stakeholders to improve our data accuracy. Previous to this, I was working with Ernst & Young in the audit department. So I would say majorly my corporate journey has revolved a lot around numbers and data. And which is when slightly like at the end of 2021, I started to feel that, probably it's time to take the next step in my career, improve, like go for a better career progression. And I would say MBA was on my mind always since undergrad also. And I think that's like the basic story of everyone, because you are not like, you need another degree if you want to like cut into that managerial and business world. So it came into the picture then, and then I started to research a little as to if MBA right now would actually align with what I want next in my career. And I did start to feel that, since I was slightly limited to my function data and everything, I wanted to now understand like a holistic and overall view of business, and what better than an MBA to actually fulfill it. Additionally, I also felt that, a lot of people like go for their MBA, especially in India, right out of undergrad. But like after having worked for like 3 or 4 years, I realized that now was the time I would actually benefit from an MBA degree. Now that you've worked in the corporate world, you know how things work, you know the gaps that you want to fulfill in your journey. And almost along the same lines, I did feel like this was also the time that I could contribute to the MBA community as well, bringing along the skills that I have. So yeah, so this was the thought of going for an MBA, and it started I think in 2021, which is when I also wrote my GMAT. And yeah, after that it was all applications and everything.
So the MBA thought came, and of course the first thing is the GMAT, right? And you said you wrote the GMAT in 2021 score. So how did you first mindset? How was it to start? How did you get out of that inertia to begin, and then how did you prepare for the GMAT? And how was the experience?
I think absolutely the first step is to just start. It's like, we will always delay it to next week, next Monday, next Sunday, next weekend. But, you don't have to really start with going for like absolute difficult topics, or if quant is your weak area, you start with quant. I think the best way to start is with your comfort zone, because that slightly brings you into that zone of studying. And I think one thing that really helped me was to think that, I used to give like we work for 8 or 9 or 10 hours a day, but we are doing that for ourselves. But a better way to like invest in ourselves is to take this next step, which is when, you have to set your priorities straight. And with working professionals, it's difficult. Like either you do it in the morning or you do it at night. But so in undergrad, I had always been somebody who studied late at night and everything. But, with working, I realized that by the end of the day, I was so exhausted. I could not actually rack my brains and do the questions that GMAT required me, that to have that level of aptitude when it was so late at night. So I switched my schedule a little bit. I switched to morning studies and everything. And yeah, and I think I just had this goal in mind that, in 3 or 4 months, I want to get done with it. Also leaving space for a reattempt in case I'm not happy. So I feel like, number one, prioritize that, GMAT is going to serve you better in the long run. Like it starts, it helps in the journey that is yet to come. And I think, start with, you also, I feel like in this GMAT process now, people like go to like, they will look for search materials from all of these places. But I just feel that, if you stick to the OG and everything, the OG was very helpful for me. And that is what the people also like, a lot of people who like GMAT tutors and everyone also say that OG is your OG actually. And I stuck to it. And I personally like the GMAT exam because I like really like English, and the verbal ability part of it is interesting. And so for me, that was always like that. That if I'm getting bored of quant, I would just jump to verbal. So just find whatever you like, and if you're demotivated on a day, then just do questions from the part that interests you.
So I was saying that you finished the GMAT and you thought this journey is done, but that's when you realize the journey is actually not done, right? So there are still in front of you. So how did that start? How did the whole MBA application journey?
Exactly. So when I thought that this is done, that was probably a very naive mistake. Because when I actually got into the application process, I realized that okay, only one step of the journey was actually done. And with GMAT, it's like you put in your hours, you study, you get a result. With application processes, I felt like every night, I used to have this existential crisis of sorts in the beginning months, that that there was so much of introspection involved, because I do feel that you do put your true self on paper, and that is the trick I feel to letting business schools know that you're not just fabricating stuff, but you have a true motive in mind. And definitely, I mean, the application process, even just starting with like normal essay writing and everything, was it was tough, because number one, we had not done that in a very long time, and it was not just fiction or something that you're writing, you're actually putting yourself out on paper. So which is when GMAT was done, and I realized it's just like one part of the process, which is when I started to look at schools that I remember that I was not even entirely clear. Like, I had 2 or 3 schools in mind, but otherwise I was not entirely clear that which other schools would I want to apply to. But which is when I started speaking to people who'd been through this entire process, asked like, of course it's important to get a help of a consultant in this, and I had a lot of people vouch for it, that it always helps if you have a consultant who can sort of help you sail through this process. And which is when I think around March or April last year, I started looking for admission consultants, and who would be somebody who would align with my needs. And something that I remember a friend of mine who had just gone to B school advised was that whosoever you actually choose, you should feel that connect, which is not just on a business level, but also on a personal level, as in the person is invested in actually seeing how you go forward, invested in your success or your failures. Otherwise, I think all of this can also become very transactional after a point. So March or April, I started looking for consultants, which is when Crackverbal came into the picture.
How did you decide where I want to apply? Whether I should apply to India, whether I should apply abroad, if I have to go abroad, what schools should I apply? So how did you make that? How was the decision-making process for you?
So one thing I think I was pretty sure in the beginning was that I did not want to apply to US schools. I did feel like there's a lot of turbulency that is involved, and turbulence that is involved, and I did feel like that we had a lot of great non-US schools also, which would be a great to be a part of. And as for India or abroad, I was sure that in India ISB is top notch, so yes, I would apply to ISB. The IIMs I was not eligible to apply because they asked for like 5 years of work ex, and at that point I had 3.5 to 4 years. And apart from that, I looked for schools in the UK. It all happens, I think a lot of it happens based on the people Like, I knew people who'd gone to schools in UK, I knew people who'd gone to schools in APAC. So, which is when I started to realize that if not US, Canada is a good option, and then the Asia region is a good option. UK, I would say I applied because I just knew somebody, I was really inspired from. She had applied to UK, so I did. But I did apply, but in hindsight, I feel I would have not. It would not have been the best decision to go over there. But I think it was mostly about where I wanted to see myself post my MBA. It was not US; it was here in Asia Pacific. So that's how the entire process went like.
So how was the whole process of first writing those essays, introspections, etc. that is needed? And then also a lot of research that you must have done on each of the schools that you applied. So how was that whole process, and how was it helpful? Was it not helpful to work with a consultant on these things also?
So I do feel like the first school that I applied to was very early on. I think it was in August or September last year. So of course the essays for the first school, I think, take the most hard work, because you are absolutely finicky about every single word that's on paper, because you want it to be picture perfect. So I remember I was working with Arun, And I used to, the best part I found was that whatever I wrote, he really made that story come out and not make like a full like a heroic or like something which is not actually real just so that it sounds good. So that was the best part. Like whatever I felt, he refined whatever I wrote, but not in a way that any of the details were false. And another great thing was, I remember that he also like connected me to the alum of the certain schools that I were applying to, like people who were actually part of it. And I think they can give a very realistic and I think honest picture as to if your essays work or if your essays do not work. So that was the part of writing the essays. And I remember like any other small issues also that I had, anything like they were asked for undergrad GPA, we had a percentage system, so any of those conversions, I think the Crackverbal team was very helpful in making me find a solution for the same. And after all of those essays and everything, when the interview call came, like you mentioned, it was a very nice and happy moment, but it also I also had this newfound tension because abhi tak we'd all applied to job interviews, and job interviews are very different from these interviews. And so I understood that GMAT is done, okay, interview call is here, but now the main part is actually cracking this interview. And I remember Oxford was the first school that I had applied to, and by the end of the process I had absolutely full clarity on whatever was there on their website, because I had read it so many times, because I was like, I need to have every detail in hand in case they ask something or the other. But and I did read a lot of interview experiences of people who had their interviews with the school. And I also had mock interviews, and which I feel were very helpful. The feedback that I got was great. We used to also get like a Zoom recording of the same. So a happy process, but it does not end there. So that was it.
So how were the actual interviews? I know you had 5-on-5. How were the actual interviews with the different teams that you spoke to? And how did you prepare for that? You mentioned about mock interviews, I know, but a little more on that.
So mock interviews, number one, very important. And like whatever feedback I used to give, I used to make sure that I actually write it down, remember it, and use it in the next mock interview that I had. Second, of course, like thoroughly read the website, and you should actually realize that is the school aligning with your career goals. Like a lot of times we apply because the school is top ranked or something, but at one point you should see that is this school actually right for me, even if I get selected. A lot of research there, a lot of mock interviews. I read a lot of experiences of people who had interviews. Then I remember Crackverbal had also provided this entire guide as to what are the most common interview questions. So I prepared all of those, your basic about you, your job, strength, weakness, teamwork, and all of those. Those are some basic questions that are common in all MBA interviews. So that was the preparation part of it. I would also say one thing that I actually noticed was after a couple of interviews that I had given, was that at one point what happens is that it was almost that I was reading so much that whatever questions that they were asking, I had very fixed answers to it. And at one point I felt like that might not seem very natural. So at one point you should probably let go of the preparation and be sure that you can't change what you are in a day or in a week. So you actually focus on whatever questions they ask, you give answers that are also natural, but they don't seem like you have all had them all prepared and everything. So you just try to make up too much stuff. So I feel like after a point you should just let go of the preparation. And in terms of the interview, so I definitely feel like NUS was my last interview, and by then I had given so many interviews of these schools as well as mock interviews that is why I feel like NUS was my best interview, because I just knew okay, this is there, okay, I can answer this and I can answer that. It felt very natural, very nice. In terms of the schools, I did feel like some schools have very conversive and interactive interviews, whereas some schools, they would just probably keep on making notes or something, which is sort of demotivating for the candidate, because you also want to talk to them, not just have this monologue of sorts. So also one thing I realized was it is very important the direction that your interview takes, and that is not dependent on just you. It is also dependent on that half-hour window that you have, if those questions go in the direction that you like. So if you don't get selected, it's not like, you did not do well, but sometimes that half an hour window was not like, it did not go in the direction that would have probably given a best perspective of who you are as a person.
So, Tuhina, if somebody is just starting off today, right, they're thinking about the MBA, maybe they're 3 years, 4 years into their work X, and they started having the same thoughts, maybe you started having a few years back.
Yeah.
What advice would you give? How should they start this whole?
Number one is to get your GMAT out of the way. Because if you have your GMAT and GMAT prep and your application prep happening at the same time, I don't think you can focus on any one of them entirely. So like give 3 or 4 months, make a rigorous schedule and get your GMAT done. Once that is done, the next step is to actually, I do feel it's good to work with an admission consultant, because I feel that they shape your thoughts in a way which these schools require. Basically, like you may have a great motive for doing an MBA, but if you're not able to express it nicely enough, so it might not help your case. But of course, that's like a personal choice as to if or not you think that's important for you. And next is to actually stay like brave and consistent in the process, because it becomes a very strenuous process also at times, because if you might not get an interview call, I mean, a lot of time when I got rejects and all, so those were very bad days. Of course, rejection is always bad, you spend the day sulking and all of that. But to also like think that this is not just a process that's defining you, but also it's not just you. Basically, if you don't get accepted, there are a lot, like you mentioned, there are a lot of external factors that are also involved. And take this also as a process of you actually understanding yourself, because there's so much of introspection that happens. And I think get your GMAT out of the way, look for a consultant to work it, put in the hard work, but also be brave and consistent.
So anyway, thank you so much, Tuhina, for the call today. Enjoy the rest of your time before batch begins.
Thank you so much.
You deserve it. And you're and like I said, you're a Crackverbal alum now, so we will be in touch with you.
Yeah, definitely.
But thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.